Welcome to another episode of the Life of Elvis Podcast. I'm your host Elvis, as always. And today with me is Laura West from San Diego, who is a nurse, a psychic, and lots of other things. So, again, one super interesting podcast this is going to be, so I can already tell. And before we get into it, shout out to our sponsor, Terra Vitality. We offer organic t-shirts made by or designed by some of our previous guests on this podcast. Make sure you check them out, they're pretty cool. But we are also working at this point. By the time you listen to this podcast, the course is probably going to be done. A beginner course for people who want to get their health and fitness into a really good state. So, link in the description below. And we are also working together with Project Child Save, who it's a non-profit organization that literally goes into places in the States or South America, wherever, to rescue kids from being trafficked. Every dollar spent, every donated goes directly towards these missions. So have a look at the description again, and thank you very much for every donation. So now let's get to our guest, Laura. Really happy to have you on. Likewise.
Thank you. I'm
All
very
right, so
excited to
can you
be
tell
here.
us a bit more about yourself, what you do, and how do you find these gifts that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am by day a registered nurse, and I've been a registered nurse for over 15 years now. I am also a psychic medium, energy healer, author, podcast host myself, former TV host of a television show on the Everyday Women Network. And I just really love everything spirit and work very closely with my spirit guides. This whole process started for me back when I was a teenager. And that's something that I realized looking back. As I was going through it, I didn't realize what was happening. But looking back, I realized how it all came together to where I am today. And it started with dream visitations from my past, from some past loved ones, from Jesus, and then I discovered spirituality. I learned about spirit guides, met my spirit guide again in a dream, and had a lot of dream visitations from people who have passed, whether they were people that I knew personally, or they were family members of friends, or they were coworkers of family members. And these are people who were knowingly passed or crossed over, or who were on their way to crossing over. So I had a lot of these experiences that happened in my dreams. And then in 2019, I started meditating for the first time. And that's when everything opened up with my mediumship and my more psychic abilities. And I always knew leading up to that that I loved everything about psychic mediums. I would watch the shows like John Edward or Teresa Caputo and be like, oh, I want to do that too. And I felt like deep down I could, but I just didn't know how. I was blocking myself because of fears. And I finally got to the point where I was said, I want to do it too. How do I do this? How do I get past that fear? And so once I started to discover that more in early 2020. So this was right before the pandemic. And I started meditating just the year before. It was like a perfect storm for everything to then transpire for me to start to communicate with those who have crossed over and those who are already on the other side, like our members of our soul teams, like angels, spirit guides, other gods and goddesses, just amazing things that came through that I had no idea was even possible, because I wanted to be awake whenever I would communicate with spirit. It was always in my dreams, and it was never when I expected it. And I wanted a bit more control over when that communication happened and how. So that was another reason why I explored psychic mediumship more and practicing and taking classes and things like that. And it proved to be very useful and helpful for me because it helped me to get there. Same with energy healing as well, because you're almost in this state of focus that meditation puts you in, and you're able to work with spirit on the other side, knowingly or unknowingly, to help heal somebody's energy. And that space was very similar to doing a reading. So that also helped to develop my skills as well, along with practice. So things really took off for me in 2020 following me starting to meditate. And I have worked very closely with my guides since then, following those intuitive breadcrumbs to do different things like write a book to help others on their spiritual journeys as well, or to start a podcast to also help others on their spiritual journeys as well. And for me to learn as well, because I have learned so much from the hundreds of episodes that I've done already with the different guests that I've had. I mean,
You
people
do.
just have incredible stories. And because the spirit world, right, is so limitless that you can't, I have learned that you can't just take one account and say that's how it is. So by taking in so many different people's experiences that they've had with spirit and their intuition, just really opens the doors of possibilities to other people who are looking for that, to realize that, okay, I don't have to just do it this way. It's not going to just come to me this way. There's so many different ways to do it because spirit is so limitless. The connection can be so limitless as well. And just really giving power back to people that they can connect with their own guides. They can connect with their own loved ones. They don't need a psychic medium, or they don't need to be this or that. They don't need to have had childhood experiences, or even had a desire to do this until later in life. There's so many things that I want to take out of people's heads, that these preconceived notions that they need to be, or they need to have had, or need to experience in order to connect with spirit as well, because they don't. So
Nice.
here I am today.
I could totally relate to you when you were saying that you were seeing these psychics and you were like, this is what I want to do. Pretty much everything that I do in my life that ended up being like a really big and important part of my life, I had that feeling too. I came across it, I was like, I want to know about this more, or I want to learn this, or something like that. And it's pretty crazy that now when I look
Exactly.
back years later, and it's like, yeah, exactly. Every time I had that feeling, it ended up being super important in my life.
But what's also important about that too, Elvis, is that not only did you have that feeling like I have, but then you follow through with it, right? But you still pursue it.
Mhm.
And that's part of it is, ooh, I want to try this out, and
Yeah,
then actually do it.
yeah, exactly.
That's
First,
a
you
big
start
part of it.
learning about it,
The work.
and then start doing it. Hopefully, gotta follow
Hmm.
your dreams, right?
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Now, back to the dreams, and that was quite interesting because dreams are a big part
Mm.
of the way I experience something that's a bit, let's just say, beyond the normal, right? I had many dreams that were precognitive. I had lucid dreams, and lots of other things. So you say you had very interesting dreams where Jesus or other people can visit you. How do you know that it's not just a normal dream?
That's such a good question. And I'm sure people wonder that when they don't experience themselves. Until you've experienced that, it's easier to understand whether or not it's a dream or a visitation. So let me explain it in how I knew for myself. I just knew. I just knew. It's because I woke up from it and I kept thinking about it. And so let me give an example. So, one of the dreams that I had in my teenage years that was really profound in this whole spiritual journey for me was a dream I had of my paternal grandmother. Now, she was in hospice, so she was dying of cancer, and my family and I got to go visit her in hospice. And that night, I had a dream about her, and she was in all white, and she came in through a door, and the light behind her was bright white. And at first, I didn't know what that meant. I just thought it was part of the dream, or like the sun was shining through the door. And then when I saw her, I said, "Grandma, you're all better." And she said, "Yes, I am." And then it was the next day that we found out that she had passed away during the night. So when I had learned that, and when I had that dream and the timing of it, I have never
Can
forgotten it
imagine.
to this day. And I just innately knew at that point, yeah, right. I just innately knew at that point that it was her letting me know that she was okay. And then that dream about Jesus, that was interesting because I grew up in both a Christian and a Jewish household. So I went to both church and I went to synagogue as well, just, kind of switching back and forth. But my family, I was very lucky. My family was very open minded, very open to me exploring what felt good to me spiritually. So I felt like I had the permission. But it didn't keep me from when I'm in church and I see all these people totally into Jesus and me just like, "Ugh, I'm not there. I can't make that genuine connection like I see these people do." And I guess it's important for me to share that I was brought up in a dual religious household because I know one of the main differences between the two religions is was Jesus the Messiah or not. Even if I wasn't brought up in two religions, I still would have been like, I, you know, con- confused. I get not confused, but unsure. I think unsure and trying to find that feeling that people had for Jesus that I just wasn't clicking with. And so it was during this time that Jesus visited me in a dream and he asked me to spread his word. And I was just even more confused because I'm like, I don't even know if I'm Christian. Like, spread your word. What are you talking about? And up until this day, that was, I mean, we're talking 30 plus years ago, and I still remember every detail of that dream. And I still go back and revisit that dream until I finally realized more recently that he meant spread the word of love, because that's what he did. I don't have to sit here and talk about the religious stuff. I could just talk about the basic foundation of what Jesus stood for, which was love. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. Because for me, I don't like to be confined by any religion. That's for me, it's very much more spirituality based. That's what feels good. So, what I'm getting to that with that example is how that dream has stuck with me and how it has made such a large impact in my life. Now, granted, we're talking years since that dream. So, how does somebody know as soon as a dream happens if it's a visitation or not? And I think it's just one of those things where you intuitively will just know or not if it was a dream or a visitation. Because dreams for me are sometimes kind of very convoluted and can be kind of complicated, and things change and morph and maybe don't quite make sense to my logical brain. Whereas when I have visitations from people who've passed or deities or entities on the other side, there's a much more clear play of events and clear messages. And I think that's how maybe I can explain the difference. And I also wake up the next day saying, wow, so and so just visited me last night or something like that. I just know it's intuitively.
Right.
So that's how I
And
know.
dreams are super fascinating. Yeah, for sure.
They can be.
One
Yes.
thing, one of my dreams came to my
Yeah.
mind when you were talking, and I haven't. I mentioned this on different podcasts with Didi Jobelab, who's a dream interpreter, so you guys can check it out. It was a really good podcast,
Mm.
and so this was like 2012, 2013, somewhere around that time, and I was still living with my parents, and we were going through some struggles there. financially. And at that those days, the atmosphere was very tense at home, and I was pretty stressed because of everything that was going on, mainly financial stuff with my dad and everything. And I think
Sure.
it was all dark when I just lie down, fell asleep for a bit. And I had this dream where I was on a pier in the middle of a lake. I can still envision it and the colors. It's very green and brown. It's very nice. It's in the middle of the lake. I
Mm.
was stood there. In front of me was Anne Hathaway, of all people. I did have a bit of a crush on her back in the days, but and she also dressed in white, and it was nothing sexual or anything. But we just held hands,
Mm.
and looked into each other's eyes, and I got so much love from her. It was so much. And the weird thing is, then I woke
Wow.
up, and I was just absolutely fine. My mood, perfect, and it just carried on like this for I don't know how long. Can't remember exactly, but it was just like everything, all the worries and everything, like a snap of a finger, just gone. So I already said this part on
Wow.
the podcast with Didi, but what I didn't say, because this happened just recently, I had one-on-one session with my medium, super nice lady from here in Charlotte, yeah, in Sweden, and she mentioned just during a session that she mentioned three spirit guides, supposedly, and one of them is female, and she said that one spirit guide wants you to experience as much love as possible. And then I had similar dreams, at least two or three that I can think of. They were quite similar, even just very recently, where I just got a lot of love from it. So I was like, it's probably her.
Yeah. Wow, that's fantastic. So you're on this lake.
No.
Did you recognize this place that you were at? No. I
Hmm.
find that, I mean, this is coming to me now, so I'm going to thank my guides for this, but I find that there are places that we can go, quote unquote, go to on the other side that are sort of our happy places. It's almost like a place that you and your guides determine beforehand that you can go back and meet, at least in your case, and a place where you can sort of regenerate as needed and regenerate and sort of recenter as needed for sure. I mean, the white to me is very symbolic of, um,
Hmm.
for me, white is usually past loved one if I see them wearing white. Uh, but I also get the feeling of angelic as well, with that whole feeling of connecting hands and just that calmness and that peace. That to me would be a dream visitation
Hmm.
versus quote unquote just a dream
Yeah,
because of the impact that it had for you afterwards.
yeah.
I mean,
It did.
that's fantastic. You can meditate and go
It's an
back to that
interesting idea. I
place.
never thought about it. But it was definitely a different dream. And it's
Yeah.
hard to tell in which way. And also the fact that I can still remember it so many years later. At least 10 years ago, and I can still remember it.
Right?
So yeah,
Yeah.
I had some crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing with those. Yeah, I bet. Well, that's the thing with like the visitations is you can remember all the
Hmm.
details, the important details at least.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
dreams can be crazy too,
And
like you
many
said.
other ones. But it's so fascinating. You can definitely tell that when you're asleep.
Yeah.
Well, we know that the dream world is not as stable as what we are experiencing right now, and it's not that far fetched
Right.
that in that state we can get receive information from elsewhere. Who knows where from or whom from?
Yeah. Sometimes those
Mhm.
little details don't matter, though I'm always curious. I like to know those details, but they don't always matter.
Sure.
So,
So what kind of other
yeah.
experiences do you have? Maybe like early on or throughout your journey?
Hmm. Yeah. Another sort of topic that I like to talk about that I think is tangible to a lot of people when it comes to spirit communication is signs that we relate to people who've passed or to members of our soul team on the other side. So I really like to share people's experiences with that, and then also share ways that people can kind of connect as far as signs go with their past loved ones, especially because I feel like that feels really important to a lot of people. So I think that signs are really um, a great way that spirit uses to communicate with us. And they use what is available physically, like coins or feathers or birds or insects, even other inanimate objects that will just resonate with the person living. And so I think it's important that people understand how much spirit is constantly communicating or attempting to communicate with us. And once you realize how much spirit is communicating, again, whether it's through intuition or through these physical signs, then you realize how, I like to say, chatty spirit world really is. They have a lot to say and a lot to share, and just to want to constantly remind us. It's human nature to doubt the signs that we get. And I think that that's okay to doubt, as long as you get back to at least having a hope, or maybe a little bit of a, okay, maybe that was from grandma, or maybe that was from my partner who passed, or my dog, or my spirit guide, or whoever it is that is communicating. So I think that skepticism that's healthy is fine. It's very human nature, but it does take practice to learn to trust the intuition that comes with knowing if a sign is from whoever. So what I like to tell people is, you keep it really simple. If you see something, whether it's a coin, we just use coins for example, it's pretty common. If you see a coin and right away you think of your mom who's passed, then okay, grandpa. Sorry, spirit's telling me to use grandpa. When you see grandpa who's passed, and they send you a coin, and if you think of grandpa right away, then that's who it's from. Because we then tend to doubt and say, well, is it really? Probably just a coin. How did it even get here? I know so and so was walking around with coins. They probably dropped it. Da 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 da. We start to justify and we start to doubt that maybe it was from spirit. And that becomes our brains doing that. So if we can just go with that initial thought, or go back to that initial thought of that was from grandpa, then know that you are correct and that was from grandpa who sent you that coin. So I have a pretty cool experience from my same grandmother who I had the dream about back when I was a teenager. She just comes through at these amazing times. So, a few years ago, when I was in the process of writing my book, I decided to hire a book coach to help me along, because as a nurse, I had no clue about the the writing, the editing, the publishing, the marketing world of books. And it's way more involved than you would ever imagine, and surprisingly more
Yeah, it's a
expensive
lot.
than you would think too. But that's a
Yeah.
side note. It is, right? Not to mention the time and the energy. So I hired a book coach to help me with those things. And I was on the fence about it, because to be honest, though she was fairly priced, it was still hard for me to swallow the cost of having hire to hire a book coach to help me write my book. And so I was a little bit torn about it emotionally for whatever my reasons were. And so I asked my grandmother for a sign to let me know if I made the right choice. And all of a sudden in my pocket, I mean, this was pretty soon after saying this. I'm talking maybe like within 10, 15 minutes. All of a sudden in my pocket, I reach in and I pull out this silk leaf. And it's significant because I have no clue where this silk leaf came from. And so that to me was my sign. And I just knew right away intuitively. And I started crying these tears because I'm like, after all these years, you're still right there and communicating with me just like you would. Like there was no doubt in my mind, but I was already pretty established in my spiritual journey by then. So I was really comfortable with that idea. And then last week, I had another situation come up. Um, with my podcast and I was really worried about it and stressing about it. And I was really trying to just be like, Spirit, like, let me know if this is going to feel, if it's going to be okay or not. But my worry was really overpowering that. And I was folding laundry and in the dryer was the same exact silk leaf that my grandmother left years before. And what's wild is it is the same exact silk leaf. I have done many loads of laundry since the first silk leaf, and there is no origin in our household of this silk leaf that we're aware of. I showed my husband and I told him, and he was like, "That's crazy." He's like, "Where do you think that came from?" I'm like, "Well, it came from my grandma." But he's like, "But where the house?" I'm like, "I don't know." It's just really crazy. So that as soon as I saw that, I was like, "Okay, I know that's grandma telling me it's going to be okay." But I was still a little worried because I'm still human. And then lo and behold, an hour later, I get an email about my podcast thing saying that it was actually a mistake and all is well. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Like I should have just relaxed then, but I was still a little bit worried. So to me, I knew that was a sign from my grandma. It had been established. I used my intuition to trust that my first thought when I saw it was that it was from grandma. And then it just sort of, for me, was validated because everything did turn out to be okay. And pretty soon after, I mean, it was just incredible, incredible experience for me. So that was actually probably the most recent experience that I've had with communication from my grandmother, and just as a good example of signs. What about you? Do you get
Basically,
signs?
as you were explaining, what happened to you, those were synchronicities, right? Pretty much, yeah. There's
Oh yeah.
something Carl Gustav Jung was talking about, where there was an interesting story, and you might have heard about it, when he had a client. She was saying that she had this dream with a scarab beetle, right? And so, she kept talking, and suddenly there was like a thumping on the window, and then first he ignored it, but he was like, man, he went to a window, opened the window. It wasn't a scarab beetle, but it was something very similar, very close, because this was in Switzerland. And he just went straight into his hand, and he was like, "Is this the beetle you saw in your dream?" Yeah. So it's pretty much a
What?
synchronicity, where yeah, it's a meaningful coincidence where
Yeah.
something external happens, but it has some correlation to something that's internal within the mind. And I don't think I necessarily had these kinds of experiences like you were describing to do with, for example, my parents or grandparents who already passed away. But there was one person I had so many crazy synchronicities. It's pretty mind blowing, really. Yeah, yeah.
Isn't it? It's mind blowing when it happens. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. I don't know how they do it,
Well,
but they
again,
do.
it comes down to why I keep saying so many times on this podcast. It's our reality is way more malleable than we think it is. The experience is very solid, and we can't do much except physically moving things, or you know. But I actually had this thought years ago. This was doing a mushroom trip, but somehow I talked about these experiences on different podcasts I did before. A great tool, right? And when you know how to use them, yeah, I,
I've heard,
or
right, like
even large
microdosing or
doses.
something. Yeah.
It's a microdosing. It's
Mm,
very it's very gentle. You barely feel it, but it does make a difference. Like I was saying before, in terms of me opening myself up and being more confident, and not confident in a egotistic way. That's a interesting aspect of it. It's not like I'm the best and
mhm.
screw everyone else or something like that. It's quite the opposite. I think I don't know whether it was Paul Stamets or
Mhm.
Dennis McKenna who said it makes you a compassionate leader. And then there's
Mm.
the large doses which totally can deconstruct reality, and your ego just all all the boundaries
Change
just get
everything.
dissolved, and
Yes.
whether it's past, present, future, inside, outside, all it is just one. And uh, that's such an important experience to have. It's nothing different than from uh,
Yeah.
it's something that people who meditate and do different practices can also experience. It's not just something specific to psychedelics, but and that is also yeah, that's actually very
Near death
similar in many
experiences too.
ways. Yeah, all this can
Hmm.
be.
That's what I've heard. Hmm.
Um, I told you, yeah. But
Without the
to be fair,
dying
even
part.
psychedelics, it's like very close to. I think
Yeah.
that's the closest you can get to dying, apart from near-death experiences and actual dying.
Yeah. Or like, or the experience that you have when you do die and you visit the other side and all. I mean, it's like life changing like that. People have these crazy spiritual awakenings and their whole life paths change. I've heard the same thing
Yeah,
with the mushrooms and stuff like that. I haven't done it myself, but I've
right.
definitely heard, and
Lots of
there's
good
good
science coming
documentaries
out
out
these
there
days,
about
which
it.
is like
So,
finally
yeah.
after so many decades. But what I was saying,
Mhm.
yeah, what I was saying
Yeah,
after,
I
I think it
know.
was my second trip. Somehow, after this, when I came back, I had this idea like, how much can consciousness actually manipulate reality? And somehow, I had this in my mind, and later, as I've learned about manifestation and everything, or even the things that I was, for example, learning about Dzogchen or Tibetan Buddhism, some of the stuff they were saying, like, I'm not sure if it was Padmasambhava or someone else. Some philosopher also came to him, and he tried to, disprove him or something like that, challenge him intellectually. So he gave him some question. I can't remember how it actually went, but at the end, Padmasambhava or whoever it was, he reached through a rock, you know, as the story goes. But it generally seems like, and there's some even good science to show this, whether it's some experiments with a random number generator or with a double slit experiment where people consciously focused on it, even from the outside of the planet, and it did actually cause some changes in what you would normally expect from it towards what they were focusing on. So
Whoa.
yeah, science is catching up
Wow.
in many ways. So especially if you think that, if you take
Yeah.
into account this idea that it's consciousness that's fundamental, not matter and atoms and all the rest of it, then okay, there's some space for these
Mhm.
things. It might be possible,
Oh
and people
yeah,
like us, when we
absolutely.
experience these things, it's
Yeah.
actually
I mean,
true.
yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, think about how
Mhm.
limited our sight is and how limited our hearing is and our smelling,
Yeah.
just compared to dogs and how much of a larger range they can smell, right? So which shows how much more there is out there that we can't comprehend with our physical senses, just like you were saying earlier. So, yeah, absolutely. I love that idea that you brought up too about the manifesting. I feel like the word
Yeah.
manifesting is kind of overused these days myself, but I love the idea of it. And I love the idea of, see, I like the word magic. And to me, it's almost like magic when you can, like how you were saying that example, people were just using their conscious brain or something to manipulate something out in
Just intention. There's nothing
space or
crazy
wherever.
or
I mean,
about it,
just
but
making these changes,
yeah.
just intention, right? Yeah, which I mean, I love that. I've been sort of internally exploring this whole idea of magic and getting that same feeling of that I did when I wanted to be a psychic medium, where I'm like, I know it's in there, just how do I get it out? The same thing is happening now with the idea of manifesting and with magic. And so I mean, I'll keep you posted how it goes, but I know that there's something, there is some sort of undercurrent of all these people who are out here doing this kind of work or spreading this knowledge on podcasts like these. There's something coming from it, and there's this undercurrent of activity or buzz that we maybe don't realize is happening, but it's like a building of energy from all of this talk about the possibilities of what we're capable of, and the conscious and the subconscious and everything spiritual. There's something that's buzzing, and it's going to come to fruition at some point. I'm just excited for when that's going to happen, because it's going to be very powerful in a very good way. This is all just coming to me now. This is pretty cool, actually. So I think that the idea that you even brought up manifesting is just the beginning of what's going to come and what humans are going to be capable of. Is it in our lifetime? I don't know, but I know that the possibility is starting to become a reality slowly. Like you said,
Yeah.
science is catching up. So,
Yes, and
yeah,
yeah,
we'll
there's
see where it goes.
definitely some big changes coming. That's for sure. I mean, even if you just look around at what's going on the planet, and
Yes.
there's no way we can carry on for 50
Yeah.
years with everything that's going on.
No,
Yeah,
we will self destruct.
but I actually heard whilst you were talking, I
Yeah.
remember this guy. Hopefully, one day I'm going to get him on podcast. He researched 12, 1400 or more NDEs, near death experiences. And he said something
Mm.
interesting that he heard from these people, that we were on a path to self destruct, but something happened in the late 80s, early 90s. They kind of switched around the path, so that now, as dire as everything seems, it's not going to happen. We're going to be just fine. And within 150 years, the Earth is going to be totally different. And things that we are talking about, it's going to be just
Mm.
commonplace. Yeah,
Wouldn't that
we'd
be
love to see
nice?
that. But also, like you were saying, us connecting here, that's something going.
Yeah.
That's it's something. You see, as I started this podcast in 2021, I, due to some stuff from my childhood, I was a bit more closed off. So I had at that point when I moved to Sweden. This was like I started this podcast. This was like 7 months after moving to Sweden or so, and I could count the really important close people I had in my life. It was my girlfriend at that time and a couple of friends. Like I could count them on one hand. Right? I knew that if I wanted to achieve what I wanted, I need to open myself up more. So I started this podcast, and the people I met, many of them I'm really good friends now, and in many cases, I felt like it was meant to be us meeting and becoming friends, and they're spread out all across the planet. Although there's like I got two hotspots on the planet in terms of friends. One is over here in Sweden, where I'm right now, northern Sweden, and the other one is California. But the rest of them is like, all over the place. And I think I had two of these people tell me that it's not coincidence, you know, that we are spread apart, all across the globe, so we can spread the good vibes all over the planet. And because of the internet, we can connect with each other.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The world got really small around the pandemic, too, when all we had was the internet and all we had were
Mhm.
virtual events and virtual this and that. And I think that it allowed us to connect to more people on a worldwide level, like you were saying, and just really open up our horizons and our connections. Because you're right, it's like this web of connections all around the world, sort of covering this planet. And we got all these little hotspots of high vibing people. I mean, though we can't see the energy from that, it's there and it's got to be doing some sort of good and positive work on the planet and with
The guy
humanity.
that I mentioned
So,
who researched these NDEs, he's a really nice thing on the podcast that I heard with him. He said that one person living in love is more powerful than a million people living in fear. And
mm,
basically everything that he was saying on this podcast is he draws from stuff that he researched in the near-death experiences.
yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of, I don't
Yeah.
know if you've heard of Dr. Michael Newton. He's passed now, but he's a psychologist. And he did a lot of, what'd you say there? Hypnosis sessions, deep sessions of having people visit their life between lives. So being while they were on the other side. And he was very much he was an atheist. And I say that because he didn't if he had a preconceived notion, it would have been to discredit what these people told him. So he wouldn't have influenced or manipulated them to say what he wanted. So I appreciated that because I felt like it allowed him to be
Mhm.
pretty unbiased in that sense. But then he started to, because he would hear the same things over and over from all of his clients who were not connected to each other in any way to say, hey, tell him this, tell him that, this is what I said, you should say the same thing. It wasn't like that at all. They were all these different case studies. And so he learned so much, and he has these two great books. They're, I want to safely say, life-changing books for anybody who is questioning. One is called Journey of Souls and the other one is called Destiny of Souls. There's like ebooks and stuff like that, but it's just um, incredible to hear these people who, on a soul level, are explaining their experiences on the other side. Like what happens when they pick their life? What are they doing on the other side? Uh, why is someone a spirit guide and someone isn't? Why do people have different color auras? The energy healing stuff. What is that really about? I mean, it's amazing the stuff that he explores in these sessions. And all because in one of his sessions, his first session, he happened to say the right thing to the person he was working with, his client. And the client was there for some sort of issue. We'll just say, I don't know, I can't remember if in this case, if he was already exploring past lives or not. Maybe not. I think he was looking to go back to this person's childhood to figure out maybe why they had anxiety or something like that. And all he asked was, take me to the origin of your anxiety. And when he did that, oh, that's what it was. When he did that, this person took him to a past life. So he was expecting to stay in the current life and just go back to visiting childhood traumas. But by asking the correct question, this client took him to a past life. And what was more profound about this experience was also that the client was able to give verifiable information about who they were in that past life. It had something to do with like World War One. I think World War One um, pilot or something was able to give names, things that were very verifiable and had nothing to do with the person's current life. So they wouldn't have known these details. And I think that was meant to be so profound to capture Dr. Newton's attention so that then he can start to explore that more and not just brush it off. But with that, he started to ask other right questions that then allowed him to explore that life in between incarnations. And so that would be similar to like talking to someone who's had a NDE, near death experience. However, I think that it goes deeper because these people aren't then going back into their bodies. Their bodies are done and they are now kind of fully submerged into the other side and doing what they need to, whether it's to heal, whether it's to pick a next life, whether it's to sit in front of they call them the elders. I can't remember now, or whatever it is that they need to do on the other side. It's just so fascinating because he talks about these clients would talk about in these past lives how when they passed they still stay around. Some decide to stay till their funeral. Some decide to just get out of Dodge right away. Some decide to stick around and see what happens. Some will talk about how, oh, my wife is crying. I'm trying to tell her that I'm here, but her grief is too strong. I can't get through. So it's really cool to hear from the perspective of spirit. I'm trying to remember why I'm even talking
Go
about
for it.
this, but I'll just keep going. But to hear from the perspective of spirit, what they were experiencing, because what it did for me at least was it opened up this idea of like, oh, so my friend or family member who's passed, they're there is a very good chance that if I think they're still around, they are. And they may still be around until their funeral. And then they can come, whenever I need them or something like that. It just really gave, for me, validation with what I already sensed about people who've passed. And I think it can give a lot of people comfort when it comes to knowing what our family members are doing and our loved ones are doing after they pass. So anyways, so I thought that was really interesting because it was another way to explore and have maybe that experience, life-changing experience um, of some connection to spirit, whether it's through psychedelics, whether it's having an NDE or having these really strong, hypnosis experiences when properly guided, to the other side. So, I mean, there's just different ways to explore it. Meditation too, but there's something about seeing it more in your mind through any of those other experiences on top of a guided meditation. It's just a little bit deeper. Not that you can't get there with a guided meditation, but if anybody's, if that's their only alternative, great. But if they can, do a bit more, there's so many great ways to do that. I don't know
You
why I
know
was
it?
talking about
Yeah.
this, but here we are.
A few things came to my mind as we were talking. Yeah, this kind of basically when I was researching Tibetan Buddhism, there's this book, very famous. It's basically the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and that's one of the main takeaways
I've
from
heard of
it.
it.
That It's basically a guide of how to help others cross on the other side. They say the people on the other side, they can hear you, but you can't hear them usually, or at least not as easily. I'll just say. And speaking of past lives,
Mhm.
I had this guest
Yeah.
on my podcast. He's also a psychic from Houston, Texas. Episode 25, Nicole Starbuck.
Hmm.
And oh, and just
Wow, good memory.
was it last week, this week? I don't know. So
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
yeah, it's very fresh.
It's
And
fresh.
it was a lovely podcast. But at one point, she did a quick reading for me. She looked into my Akashic records, and for the first
Hmm.
time, someone told me something about my past lives. And I just want to also share the aftermath, of, which is not in the podcast. So she mentioned I was in wars in the past, you know, and she was very correct in terms of the themes of it and how it's affecting my current life. I was like, yeah, it's so accurate. Even when she was saying that on the podcast. But interestingly enough, afterwards, we stayed in touch. And the next day, I messaged her because I had a dream. It was a fairly complex dream, but and fairly positive, apart from being late for my flight to San Diego or something like that. But at one point, just all of a sudden, I was in this old building. It was very desolate and kind of dark, and I was trying to get away from these enemy soldiers. I don't know whether they were Middle Eastern or Chechen or something like that. I would say late 80s, 90s,
Mhm.
2000s, something like that, around that time. And I was trying to get away, so I
Mm.
took out machine gun, took down a few of them, and I managed to get out. And so I messaged her because she told me that I was in wars in past life. And I was like, I had this dreams, and she told me she also had a dream with me, and in that dream, because the day before, well, like right after the podcast, we did talk a little bit about aliens, and so in her dream, I was in Roswell in the 50s, and something to do with aliens and the military, some experiments. And I was like, that's so crazy because I would love to go to Roswell. Um, I told her I was thinking about doing this video series when I go to places where something like that happened. And Roswell, I mean, I've been reading about it since I was a kid, so it would be so amazing to go there. So that was quite interesting.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. Must have been impactful for her too, that reading. For I've heard of that too, where it's like after readings or uh, like hypnosis sessions or something like that, that you could have pretty vivid dreams to follow.
Yeah,
I've heard of that. So how interesting! It's almost like
maybe.
she
Who
unlocked
knows?
something
It's
in
hard
your
to tell
brain
whether it was just
to
my brain
revisit.
processing what she told me or something else. I don't know. But the fact that she also had a dream with me that night is just interesting. Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah.
So before we started recording this podcast, you told me that you also helped some spirits cross over to the other side. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. So I've done it a handful of times because it's sort of it's one of the newer ventures that I have gotten brave enough to do. So I just followed those intuitive breadcrumbs to try the next thing, and I started getting really interested in crossing over work. And what that means is whether you subscribe to it or not, the spirit world is endless. So I never say it's this way or that, but there do seem to be times, whether it's just an energy or it's actually a soul or spirit, that just needs a little bit of extra help to either clear if it's energy or to finally make that decision to go to the other side and continue on with their soul's journey. And so I had decided that I wanted to learn as much as I could about it. I was listening to this other podcast that I really like, and he had a guest on there, and I found that she was the work that she was doing sounded really interesting. And so I started looking at her stuff, and I saw that she taught crossing over work. So I took one of her classes, and I found it really fascinating. I did have to get over the fear, though, of like, am I going to come across really scary entities? I really like to work with high vibing entities, especially when I'm doing my readings. I don't work with anything less when I do my readings for people. But I also know that I was intuitively interested to do it. So I knew that there had to be a space for it somewhere. And when you look at spirits who are quote unquote stuck from a human perspective, that they are or were someone's parent or child or something, sister, brother, something like that. And it's their fear or their anger or something that's keeping them from crossing over to continue their soul's journey. When you can look at them from that human standpoint, you don't have to agree with what they did in their life. If they were a murderer, if they were something bad, made bad choices, you don't have to agree with that, but you still have to. That's not what it's about. It's not up to us to judge what they did and choose, well, I'm not going to help them, they deserve to be stuck. It's not like that at all. That's not my choice. Anyway, so it's once you can get past that and they see that you have gotten past that, you're not intimidated by them, you're not scared of them, or you're at least not going to let that fear get in the way of you helping them, then it, from the experiences that I've had, it almost like melts away whatever darkness or however they present to me to try and scare me or to keep me away or whatever. It melts away when that happens, and I'm able to work very closely with my spirit guide. And I will say, the times that I've done this, it's all been virtual, but I work very closely with my spirit guide to help me know what to do next, help me with every step of the process. Because if it were up to me, I'd be like, I don't know, like sage, light a white candle, and then hope that they go. But it could be a bit more than that, or every soul needs something a little bit different. So I rely very heavily on my guides to do that. And before I do that, I do like to say I definitely ground and protect and clear myself, because I don't need to risk taking anything home or anything sticking to me or whatever spirit can do. I only like to keep high vibe around me. So I like my high vibe to extend outward and not low vibe coming towards me. So I work very closely with my guide. Like, he is right here next to me. His name's Jason. He's right here next to me. And actually, you can't really see it. That's a picture of him right there. He's behind my candles. I'll have to get it. I'll show you at the end. But yeah, he's right there with me, and it's every step. What do I do next? What do I do next? And he shows me and he guides me and he tells me what to do next. And we do it until there feels to be some sort of completion, as in I see, and I'm talking about my mind's eye, my clairvoyance, like I see that they've been taken to the other side. That's usually how it goes. I can see it happen. One way or another, I've seen angels take the souls to the other side. I've seen a mother of the child that was still here reach her hand out and take the boy to the other side. So that's usually how it goes. And I will say that there are times when it does start out scary. Like I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. Like I do not like scary movies because I get scared very easily. And so sometimes it's like I'm watching a scary movie and I have to remember that I am there and loved and protected and guided. And as soon as I can get past that, spirits help break them out of the cycle, because what keeps them quote unquote stuck is they can't break that cycle of thinking of, like I said before, fear, anger, whatever. And it's like a cycle that they get stuck in. So by working with them, you try to, and with my guide, we figure out ways to help get them unstuck. For the little boy, it was, I think, I'm trying to remember now. It was water, which turned into, I think, a baseball, if I can remember correctly. There's something about that that helped him to get unstuck out of that fear mind frame. And then I was able to work with him then and help him cross over. Um, can't remember some of the other ones. What did it for them? But it's just whatever it is that they need to sort of get out of that mind frame. And it could be that simple as showing them water or showing them something that they loved in their life, something that brought them joy. And it's that simple because until somebody can show them that, no one knows to show them that. And so they kind of are stuck in that cycle. Even if it's such a simple thing that they need, unless you start to work with them intentionally, no one knows it's that simple thing that they need to break out of the cycle. Simple to us, but to them may mean everything. So, anyway, so the crossing over work is something that I have explored and been able to do a few times, and it's been very satisfying. Of course, there's that doubt of, well, did I actually do it? Like, and the only way to really know is, how does it feel in there now? Like, does it feel better? Has there been any activity? Just to know if there's any follow up, I guess, that way. But it's just the doubt sometimes creeps in. I think that's very normal, because you want to do good. Like, you want to do work that's going to help people, help souls, and you just follow the guidance that you get. And it's so circumstantial, this work, because science is not quite there yet. I don't have physical evidence or proof that a human may need to know, okay, see, you could see the energy disappeared. You could see it. We don't have that yet. A lot of it is, well, how does it feel? Like, does it feel different? We're a lot of circumstantial evidence. Is there still activity going on? Yes or no? So, there is that feeling of doubt. But at the same time, I think that if the intentions are good intentions out of love, in the hopes to help people, then it works.
Yeah,
Then,
it's true.
what's the harm? So,
It's very interesting
yeah.
what you're saying. I actually had a conversation with a friend recently whom I met in San Diego because I mentioned Didi, who was on my podcast. When I was there, we met up at Old Town San Diego. I went to the old cemetery there. And yeah, right next to it is the Whaley's house, which
Nice.
says, America's most haunted house. And yeah, it was definitely,
Right.
I mentioned some of the stuff that happened in previous episodes. There were some pictures that we took. Actually, there was one photo I took of my friend. Right now, I'm at number three. Three people who, independently of each other, said that there's someone else on the photo, not just her. Yeah.
Ooh. Where did you take it? Like, was it at the cemetery you took
Um,
it, or at the
Hold
Whaley
on.
house?
We just left the cemetery because we first met her when it was still light. Then we went around
Uh huh.
Old Town to see what it's like there. We had some food, and when it was dark, we went back to the cemetery. Right. That's where I took also another picture where there's at the bottom left corner there's
Mm.
something white over there. It looks almost like smoke or something. I can show later. So
Yeah.
and after we were done, so we left the cemetery. The lady's house, as you were leaving, is on the right side. And we went across the street, across the road, and my friend had a car parked over there. We went to a car, and then she was like, "Let's go out. I'm gonna do a cleanse." You know, so we went out, and she did, because she's a Reiki healer. So she did the thing, and she said that she felt something
Mm.
leave, something heavier, some kind of energy. Yeah, yeah. And
Oh,
that's when I
good.
took the picture of
Good
her,
call then.
and I was basically the cemetery was
Mm.
behind her, if I remember properly, or somewhere around there.
Mm. Sure. Wow. Well, in that case, technology has kept up with
Yeah. Well, on
with
that picture
energy.
of her,
That's
you can't
crazy.
see actually
Wow.
something. I
Pretty cool.
think whenever someone said that there's something else, they didn't see it with their physical eyes. While I was talking to my friend, who
Wow.
randomly I met her over there in San Diego twice. But on the second time, we actually started talking to each other, and you know, get to know. So it turns out she had interesting experiences at Bailey's house and around the area as well. And we were just having this conversation recently because she I don't think she sees things, but I think she feels things and picks up on behavior of whoever is there. So yeah, so she had some
Mm.
really intense feelings that didn't
Very
feel like
cool.
hers. And I said to her like, "Oh, we tend to
Mm.
think of these spirits and give them very human characteristics, the consciousness and everything. But it could be that it's like you were saying, it's just some kind of energy, it's some kind of imprint. It can be something that's like a
Yeah.
like a loop, constantly repeating itself. It might not even be conscious entirely, or not as much. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's definitely a very interesting
Yeah.
topic. Yeah, exactly.
I know. The
It's
possibilities are
something to be
endless.
aware of.
Yes.
And like you're saying,
Yeah.
if you it's something that's been
Hmm.
happening to me over the past few years. I've been getting more in touch with my intuition, and you can feel the different energies of people, what kind of intentions they have, what kind of people, what kind of person they are. And same goes about places. You come to a
Hmm.
place and it's like, something off about this. So it's just about leaning into it, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Very empathic. Yeah. And I think people who maybe don't even consider themselves intuitive or empathic, they're still spirit, they're still a soul, so they can still sense if something feels good or bad. And we say it all the time, like, I just don't like the way this feels, or I do not like the vibes of that, or something like that, or I just don't like the way it feels in here. Whatever the case may be, I think that it's like our
Yeah,
spiritual
everyone
radar
has
goes
um,
off.
these abilities. It's
Yeah.
not something that's exclusive to certain people. Obviously, some people can access it more easily for a large variety of reasons. But yeah,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And just the fact that, you want to explore your intuition, I think just also sets up the groundwork to being more aware
yeah.
and it strengthening too.
Thank you.
So good for you.
Okay, so usually before we finish, I ask my guests a few questions. If there was one piece of advice you could give to
Okay.
people, what would it be?
Hmm. I find a running theme in the guests that I have on my podcast and in my own life. And it goes back to learning to trust your intuition. So, my advice would be to learn what intuition feels like to you and how to learn to trust it and to hone in on it, because it not only helps you if you want to go on this journey of psychic mediumship or spirituality, but it helps you to know if you should go left versus right, if you should buy whole milk or 2%, if you should buy that house, if you should move. I mean, all life decisions. It helps in everything. And it can help you to be more clear and more certain of the decisions that you make. So, my advice would be to learn what your intuition feels like to you when it's a yes versus, ooh, that doesn't feel good. And then
I doubled
learn
that
to hone in on it.
totally. That was part of the process of me moving countries this time again. I remember at one point I was like, okay, do I put my notice to Volvo to get my car back or not? I was like, do I want to be 3 months from now still at the job that I'm at now? And the answer was just for my gut feeling, like, no. Yeah, yeah,
There you go, right? You saved yourself
yeah.
hours of headache.
What do you think is the meaning of life? Very quickly.
Hmm. It's to be good, do good, and then go home.
Yeah.
Simple.
And where can people find you?
So I do have a link tree that has a link to all of my stuff, including my socials, link to my podcast, all that good stuff. I am looking it up right now. So it's
It's going to be
linktr
in the description.
dot ee forward
Yeah,
slash guided west.
yeah,
Oh, good.
in the
Okay.
description
So
below.
link my link tree.
Cool. So,
Perfect.
yeah. So you
Yeah,
can
that's
reach her through
everything's there.
that. If you want to find out more about Terra Vitality, or if you want to donate to Project Child Safe, again, everything is in the description. So it was wonderful talking to you, Laura. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
you
so
guys, if you
much.
like it, give it a like, share with your friends, comment below, subscribe so you don't miss further more episodes. And we'll catch you in the next one.